Dana. I was diagnosed with stage 4 diffuse large B-cell non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, January 2018. Treatment started out as R-CHOP, which I think is the traditional chemotherapy regimen that was delivered to me through City of Hope. And that was done every couple of weeks, 5 overnight stays in the hospital with a constant drip of the chemotherapy medicines. During the initial diagnosis, the doctor did tell me that if the because the cancer was very aggressive, that the chemotherapy would perhaps have a 50-50 chance of working, and that we would do scans to see if it had recurred. And after about 5 or 6 months, we did a scan, and I was warned in advance that as stem cell treatment using my cells, if I were able to extract the cells from my body, would be the next step in trying to eradicate the cancer. So I was surprised that the cancer had recurred, but considering what the doctor had told me, I did have that fair warning in the back of my head about what the next step might look like. I had 2 back-to-back transplants. The first one was an autologous transplant where they extract my own stem cells. Then the year after that, I had a allogenic transplant where I had an unrelated donor donate his stem cells. There were multiple tests and different kind of procedures that they performed on me a few months prior to the proposed transplant date, which included tests to see if my heart and my lungs could withstand a stem cell transplant, as well as an analysis of my liver, kidney functions, and also a process called apheresis, which was the extraction of stem cells. That was a process that would get the stem cells out, but prior to that, I needed to inject myself with a drug to create more stem cells that would appear outside of the bone marrow. So during the apheresis process, the stem cells would be easier to extract. So I was able to pass all the tests and go through the apheresis procedure and get enough of the stem cells for the upcoming transplant. I set about preparing for the second transplant by undergoing the similar kinds of tests that I did for the autologous transplant to make sure that my body could withstand donor stem cells. And then I had to go through chemotherapy in order to get in complete remission, and also do a clinical trial immunotherapy to give me very aggressive treatments to really ensure that I could get into remission quickly in order for the transplant to take place as soon as possible. The immunotherapy was, I believe, given in combination with some chemotherapy, and they were weekly outpatient infusions. However, there were a couple of instances that the immunotherapy infusions created side effects, which included severe digestive problems that ended up getting me in the hospital for a couple of days, and another immunotherapy side effect that I unfortunately struggled with, created severe flu-like symptoms, severe headache, which landed me in the hospital for a couple of days while they tried to give me heavy-duty pain medication to take down the fever and try to take the edge off of the really intense headaches I was getting from the immunotherapy treatment. The last treatment I had was the donor transplant. When people think about transplants, they think of a solid organ transplant where you go in for a big operation and you've got a team of doctors and it's 10 hours to take one thing out and then put something else in and make sure everything's all connected. Well, of course, a stem cell transplant couldn't be any less dramatic. You're hooked up to what looks like a couple of units of blood in a plastic bag, and you've got 2 nurses there just inputting the stem cells in your body, and then it takes about 45 minutes. Over time, my anxiety did increase with each recurrence because I lost my inner confidence about being cured, in spite of the things that people would try to tell me and pray and read this and take this tea. All those things didn't work. So I finally started working with a psychologist at City of Hope who helped me grasp some of the ways I could control my reactions to scary news, and also a psychiatrist who helped me with anxiety medication, which I have found to be very, very helpful. And I'm very grateful because when you're getting a transplant from a donor, it's very scary ahead of time, because if you've had a transplant of your own cells, you know exactly how the days are going to go in the hospital in terms of the possible side effects and how you're going to feel being attached to an IV and having to face those scenarios again with a donor that is much more unknown. I've been very fortunate. I have a wonderful husband who's been incredibly devoted and caring, compassionate, patient. And I also have 3 adult children. One is my son-in-law, who's married to my daughter, and my son. And after my first diagnosis, 2 of my kids, my daughter and her husband, were living in Berlin, and they dropped their jobs and their school and moved in with me. And my son lived here for a little while. And so they all were here taking care of me after my first diagnosis, and they've been in and out helping since then. Actually, I'm getting more of a sense of what being a caregiver is like, because about a month ago, my dad was diagnosed with diffuse large B-cell lymphoma in his brain. They had the tumor removed, and he's terminal. He's got 4 to 6 months to live. He chooses not to seek treatment. And he does have my same doctor at City of Hope. So now I'm in caregiver mode while still being in remission. So I'm now looking at it from a unique point of view. I don't question him. I support him. And that feels very gratifying, because I understand what it feels like to look at the end of your life, because I was having those conversations with myself when I was told it was terminal unless we get help right away. So I am still continuing remission, which has now been about a year, almost a year and a half. That's the longest remission I've been able to stay since I was first diagnosed in January of 2018. I'm going about once a month because my blood levels need to be checked. I tend to be low on something called immunoglobulin, which is an antibody, I believe, made by the white cells. And so I get infusions about every 6 to 8 weeks. I've had to reinvent my own life. I was a professional photographer, was very busy. I had spent 7 years building up my business. It was my dream business. I was doing events. I was doing headshots. I was doing work for private schools, and I was starting to make really good money. And at the time I got sick, I had events booked through the month of October. So I had 10 months of events that I had to call and cancel, and it was really heartbreaking. So I'm reimagining my photography business by focusing on some other things because I don't have the stamina to do events anymore, probably. And I'm also taking classes online. So I'd like to just go back to photojournalism. And I'm really hoping that I'll be able to stay in remission so I can do human interest stories. And I definitely have a deeper, richer perspective on the plight of human suffering that I never would have had before I was diagnosed. So I think that has been the most positive, enriching improvement in my outlook on the human condition.